Have you ever wondered what happens when an ordinary person performs an extraordinary act of heroism, only to disappear as if they never existed? This is exactly what happened when Mike Donovan, a struggling single father of two, risked everything to save one of the world's wealthiest men, and then vanished completely, leaving no trace behind. If you're intrigued by stories of everyday heroes, mysterious disappearances, and the true meaning of wealth, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more captivating real-life mysteries that will leave you questioning what you know about human nature. The rain fell in sheets across the Manhattan skyline that October evening, turning the city into a blur of neon reflections and shadow. Alexander Reed, founder and CEO of Reed Technologies with a net worth of $64 billion, stood at the edge of the Hudson River Park, his designer suit soaked through, his gaze fixed on the churning waters below. The financial world thought he had everything, but they didn't know about the terminal diagnosis he'd received that morning, or the federal investigation threatening to expose decades of questionable business practices. For Alexander, the cold river seemed like the only escape from a life that had become unbearably hollow despite his immense wealth. Mike Donovan was just trying to make it through another difficult day. After losing his wife to cancer 3 years earlier, he'd been raising their two children, Emma, 12, and Jacob, 9, while working 2 jobs and still falling behind on rent for their small Queens apartment. That evening, he'd taken an extra shift as a maintenance worker at a nearby office building, which meant walking home along the river in the downpour. Mike had exactly $27 in his bank account, a stack of overdue medical bills at home, and no idea how he'd afford his daughter's upcoming school trip. The weight of constant struggle pressed down on his shoulders heavier than the rain. Neither man saw the other at first. Alexander had climbed over the safety railing, his knuckles white with tension. Mike was hurrying past, head down against the rain, when something made him look up. Later, he wouldn't be able to explain what caught his attention. A movement, perhaps, or some subconscious awareness of another soul in distress. "Hey," Mike called out, his voice nearly lost in the storm. "Hey, what are you doing?" Alexander turned slightly, his expression empty. "Go away," he said, his voice flat. "This doesn't concern you." Mike dropped his worn backpack on the wet pavement and approached slowly. "Look, I don't know what's going on, but whatever it is, this isn't the answer." He could see now that the man in the expensive suit was trembling. From cold or fear or resolve, he couldn't tell. "You have no idea who I am or what I've done," Alexander said bitterly. "Some things can't be fixed." Mike inched closer, rain streaming down his face. "My name's Mike. I'm nobody special, but I did know something about wanting to give up." He gestured to the city behind them. 3 years ago, I lost my wife. Cancer left me with 2 kids and more debt than I'll ever pay off. Every morning I wake up wondering how we'll make it through another day. But we do. Something in Mike's simple honesty made Alexander hesitate. For a man accustomed to being surrounded by people seeking his wealth or power, the straightforward compassion from a complete stranger was jarring. What happened next would later be pieced together from security camera footage and Alexander's own account. When the railing, slick with rain, gave way under Alexander's weight, Mike lunged forward without hesitation. In the chaotic seconds that followed, Mike managed to grab Alexander's arm while anchoring himself to the remaining section of railing. The struggle lasted less than a minute, a desperate man clinging to another who had, moments before, been ready to let go. When it was over, both men lay on the wet pavement, gasping. Mike had torn his work uniform and scraped his hands raw. Alexander stared up at the rain, experiencing something unfamiliar, the shocking realization that he wanted to live after all. "Why?" Alexander asked finally. "Why would you risk your life for a stranger?" Mike sat up slowly, wincing at the pain in his shoulder. "Because that's what people are supposed to do," he said simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "Help each other." Neither man could have predicted how that rainy evening would change everything. Alexander insisted on driving Mike home, an incongruous sight, the billionaire's luxury car pulling up to Mike's rundown apartment building. On the way, something remarkable happened. They talked, really talked, in the way people rarely do with strangers. Alexander spoke about the emptiness of success without purpose. Mike described the struggle to keep hope alive while facing constant financial pressure. "My daughter Emma wants to be a doctor," Mike said at one point, a hint of pride breaking through his exhaustion. "Smart as they come. Her teacher says she could get a scholarship if she keeps her grades up." When they arrived, Alexander insisted on getting Mike's contact information. "I owe you more than I can express," he said, handing Mike his private business card. "Please call me tomorrow. I want to thank you properly." Mike nodded, too tired to argue, and disappeared into his building. He didn't notice the black sedan parked across the street, or the men inside watching with intense interest. The next morning, Mike Donovan didn't call Alexander Reed. In fact, he didn't show up for either of his jobs. His children didn't attend school. When Alexander sent his assistant to check the apartment, they found it empty. No Mike, no children, no personal belongings. It was as if the Donovan family had been erased overnight. Alexander Reed, a man accustomed to having access to anything he wanted, found himself facing a mystery he couldn't solve. The man who had saved his life had vanished completely. Security footage from the apartment building showed Mike and his children leaving at 3:17 a.m. with a single suitcase between them, getting into an unmarked van. After that, nothing. What Alexander didn't know then was that Mike Donovan had more secrets than his humble appearance suggested. 6 years earlier, before his wife's illness, Mike had been an accountant at a firm with ties to both legitimate businesses and organized crime. He had discovered discrepancies in certain accounts, evidence of money laundering on a massive scale. Following his conscience, Mike had quietly gathered evidence and approached the FBI. His testimony had helped bring down 3 high-ranking crime figures, and in return, he and his family had been placed in witness protection. The life of Mike Donovan, maintenance worker, was a carefully constructed identity. His real name, his past, his original home, all had been left behind for safety. When Mike saved Alexander Reed that night, his face had been captured by news cameras responding to the incident. By morning, his image was circulating on social media and news websites. Somewhere, someone recognized him, and the protective bubble around the Donovan family shattered. The FBI moved quickly, relocating Mike and his children in the middle of the night. New names, new city, new lives again. The family had been trained for this possibility, but that didn't make it less traumatic, especially for the children who had to leave behind friends and school without saying goodbye. Meanwhile, Alexander Reed was transforming in ways that shocked the business world. The near-death experience and his brief connection with Mike had catalyzed something within him. He announced a dramatic restructuring of his company, including unprecedented profit sharing with employees, massive philanthropic initiatives focused on medical debt relief, and a personal commitment to ethical business practices that sent shockwaves through the corporate landscape. When interviewed about this radical change in direction, Alexander would only say, "I was fortunate enough to meet someone who reminded me what really matters. I owe him everything." But privately, Alexander couldn't let go of the mystery of the vanished single father. He hired private investigators, offered rewards for information, even leveraged his considerable influence with government contacts, all without success. It was as if Mike Donovan had never existed. 6 months passed. Alexander's transformation from ruthless business tycoon to compassionate philanthropist continued to make headlines. His new foundation had already helped thousands of families burdened by medical debt, families just like Mike's. But the man himself remained haunted by the disappearance of the person who had saved him in more ways than one. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon, Alexander's private phone, a number known to less than 10 people in the world, rang. "Mr. Reed? This is Emma Donovan, Mike's daughter." Alexander nearly dropped the phone. "Emma? Where are you? Is your father all right?" "Dad doesn't know I'm calling," she said, her young voice serious beyond her years. "We're not supposed to contact anyone from before. But I saw you on TV talking about helping people with medical bills, and I thought maybe it was because of us." "It is," Alexander admitted. "Your father changed my life. Please, is he safe? Are you safe?" There was a pause. "We're okay. Different names now, different city. Dad works at a warehouse. I'm not supposed to say more. Emma, I want to help your family, Alexander said urgently. Whatever your father did before, he didn't do anything wrong. Emma interrupted fiercely. He told the truth about bad people, and now we have to hide forever. It's not fair. The conversation lasted less than 3 minutes. Emma wouldn't reveal where they were living now, but she agreed to pass a message to her father. Tell him Alexander Reed says thank you, and that when he's ready, there's a place for him where no one will look for him. 2 weeks later, Alexander received an email from an anonymous account containing just an address in Seattle and a time. The coffee shop was small and half empty when Alexander arrived, having flown across the country on his private jet with no security detail, something his advisors had strongly protested. He saw Mike immediately, sitting in the corner, looking both the same and completely different. His hair was dyed gray at the temples now, and he wore glasses he probably didn't need. "You shouldn't have come," were Mike's first words as Alexander sat down across from him. "And Emma shouldn't have contacted you. She's worried about you," Alexander said simply. "And so was I." Mike glanced nervously around the cafe. "I don't have much time. If they realize I've broken protocol." "Who are they?" Mike sighed. "Let's just say I used to know things that certain people would still kill to keep quiet. The government has kept us safe, but it's not much of a life. The kids deserve better." Alexander leaned forward. "That's why I'm here. I have a proposal." Over the next 30 minutes, Alexander outlined a plan that seemed both impossible and perfect. He owned a sustainable agricultural development on a private island in the Pacific Northwest. The project employed dozens of people, many of whom lived on-site in a small, self-sufficient community. There was a school for children, medical facilities, everything a family might need. "No one would look for you there," Alexander explained. "Everyone who works for me is thoroughly vetted. You and your children would have new identities, of course, but you wouldn't be alone and isolated like you are now." Mike stared into his untouched coffee. "And what would I do on this island paradise?" "Whatever you want," Alexander replied. "Based on what Emma told me about your background in accounting, you could help manage the financial aspects of the project, or something completely different. The point is, you would have choices." Mike looked up, his expression complex. "Why would you do this? You don't even know me." "I know enough," Alexander said quietly. "You saved my life when you had nothing to gain and everything to lose. You showed compassion to a stranger who thought he had nothing left to live for. If that's not knowing someone, I don't know what is." 3 months later, a family of 3 arrived at a private dock in Washington state. They boarded a boat under a gray sky, carrying new identification documents, new backgrounds, and for the first time in years, new hope. The island came into view gradually. Green hills, modern buildings designed to blend with the natural environment, solar arrays gleaming in the breaks of sunlight. On the dock stood Alexander Reed, dressed not in his customary suit, but in casual clothes more appropriate for island life. The man who stepped off the boat was no longer Mike Donovan, but the smile that passed between the two men needed no name. It was the recognition of a connection that had begun on a rainy night by the Hudson River and had somehow survived against impossible odds. Emma and Jacob ran ahead, already excited by the glimpse of other children playing near a community building. Mike, now going by Thomas Grant, stood beside the billionaire he had once saved. "I can never repay what you've done for my family," he said quietly. Alexander shook his head. "You still don't understand. There's no debt between us, only balance. You gave me back my life and my purpose. This is not charity, it's justice." In the years that followed, the island community thrived. Thomas Grant eventually became its operational director, his financial expertise helping to expand the sustainable model to other locations. His children grew up in safety and possibility, with Emma eventually leaving to attend medical school, just as she had once dreamed. Alexander Reed continued his philanthropic work, focusing particularly on programs that help families trapped in cycles of medical debt and poverty. His business practices became a case study in corporate ethics. When asked about the source of his transformation, he would only smile and say, "Sometimes the richest person in the room is the one with nothing to lose and everything to give." The true story of the single dad who saved a billionaire and then vanished remained known to only a handful of people. But its impact rippled outward in countless ways, touching lives far beyond that rainy night by the river. It was a reminder that sometimes the most powerful acts are the ones no one sees, and that true wealth isn't measured in dollars but in the courage to help others, even when you have nothing but yourself to give. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible tales of ordinary people making extraordinary differences. Remember, the most meaningful connections in life often come when we least expect them, sometimes even on the darkest nights when all hope seems lost.